Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the IDRiM podcast. Today, carrying on from the last episode of the podcast where we talked about IDRiM 2025, what we wanted to do as tomorrow will be the online presentations for IDRiM 2025 Young Scientist session. We are going to look back to IDRiM 2024 and look at our winners of the YSS awards, either it was posters, in person, or online. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let my guests introduce who they are, and then I'm going to ask some questions based upon what they're about their research, about their career experiences, and some reflections and tips for participants this year.
All right, so let me go first. Hello everyone, my name is Rahadianto. As you may know, as I'm also a co-host of this podcast, but in these occasions, I'm the guest as well, as I'm the first winner in the IDRiM 2024 Young Scientist sessions in the online sessions, which I actually got it when in my old institutions in Kyoto University, and now I'm already in the Lund University in Sweden. At the time, I presented about the stochastic evaluations of volcanic ash risk, and now I'm moving forward from the volcanic ash risk research to know more about critical infrastructures here in Sweden.
So I was the second prize winner last year for the Young Scientist presentation session. And I was an urban planner who had presented a solution-oriented presentation for urban floods. And right now my job role has changed, and I'm a researcher who is working with disasters fully. May it be earthquakes, tsunamis, landslides, and other disasters. So my goal still remains the same. It's disaster-proof planning for future cities so that they are more sustainable, resilient for people to live in. And I am still employed in the faculty of ITC in the University of Twente, the Netherlands. And yeah, that's basically my introduction in short.
Okay. Thank you very much. My name is Tsuchida from the University of Tokyo in Japan, and I'm mainly an anthropologist of the disasters, about mainly in Sri Lanka and in Japan, and comparing how disaster or how the everyday life has occurred and how they live with disaster or to do some cohabitations. And then yes, I'm the Brown Prize in the YSS Young Scientist sessions in last year in oral presentations. Then it's very honored to give some speech. Thank you very much. Yes, back to you.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello everyone. My name is Akihiro Suzuki, and I'm currently a doctoral student and academic researcher at Hokkaido University in Japan. And my research theme is disaster risk management, particularly how local stakeholders, including municipalities and residents, can prepare for future extreme rainfall and flooding events under climate change. My presentation at the 2024 IDRiM conference was a part of this research. Furthermore, we are now expanding the method to include collaboration between municipalities and residents by simulating the same potential disaster scenarios together. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for introducing yourself. So what I wanted to do, first of all, was very much, get a sense of research journey to this state. So the idea is that every person, in research has different paths. Some come through a very more linear process, have very specific ideas and research, and there's a specific reason why they've gone down the idea. Some, and this is something that IDRiM increasingly has recognized, is that people take different paths. They go through practitioner routes, then come in to do research later on. So what I wanted to do was, first of all, ask you, could you tell us a bit more about your background? and what led you into your current field of research? And we'll go around in the same order we did last time.
All right then. My background is actually in computer science and informatics engineering. That one of particular reasons that I'm researching about disasters and risk management, particularly because of, well, I'm come from Indonesia and like a lot of disaster happenings there. And I also, during my years at university there, I encountered many disasters and especially volcanic eruptions. That's why like I decided to research on volcanic eruptions when I did my postgraduate training in Japan. And then when I'm doing that, those research, when I'm focusing on hazard specifics and like focusing on the impacts of the societies and like how to provide the countermeasure strategies to manage the impacts, which is at the times focusing on the single hazards having many different impacts and then cascading to many others. But in some sense still limited in the primary impacts. And now moving on to Sweden here, I'm focusing on the other part of disaster that focus thoroughly on assessing vulnerability in the systems regardless of the hazards. So in the way my research unit so far is basically coming from a single point of focus, then expanding that in order to have a more holistic view of disaster risk that coming from the hazards and vulnerability perspective, and to provide more solutions that can handle systemic and extreme events like that.
So my background is I'm a geographer with specialization in geomorphology. And after that, after completing my bachelor's and first master's in India, I moved to the Netherlands for pursuing a degree in urban planning and management. That's when I started doing research on urban areas. I started observing cities in a different way, and I met my supervisor over here, Dr. Karin Peffer. And I remember the first meeting that I had with her is that research should have a social impact. It should have a societal impact on the people, which is also a motivation that I have while I do research, is to have a societal impact so that it does not remain a piece of paper or lying somewhere in as a publication. And to start with, like the solution-oriented research, I learned it all from the Netherlands. And I worked on urban floods, urban heat, and I suggested solutions like nature-based solutions, which can mitigate, or if not mitigate fully, can reduce the impact of those disasters, which have increased their frequency these days. The hazard patterns worldwide have changed a lot because of climate change, because of many other anthropogenic factors. So this is something that I fully take into consideration when doing a research on any disaster. And I try to focus on not only the problem, but also the solution. So my background in geography helps me study the nature and patterns of the disasters. And my urban planning perspective helps me go towards the direction of a solution so that our future generations have a more resilient and safer city to live in.
Yes, for me, so my research journey started with a deep interest in how communities and community lives with and respond to critical or cascading disasters. So I have conducted some field work, mainly in Japan and Sri Lanka, looking at how everyday practice, livelihood, and local knowledge interact with floods, earthquake, and other hazard. So over time, I became particularly interested in how disasters are not only some one moments of the crisis, but also the part of people everyday lives and economies. For example, how floods and industry are intertwined in Sri Lanka, or how volunteer organizations work in post-disaster or inter-disaster or in-between disaster recovery in Japan. This has led me to do a deep dive into various themes of resilience or care and social hydrological governance or other topics from these anthropological perspectives. That's my journey.
For me, I began my career studying methodology, the impact of climate change on heavy rainfall, like dynamic and thermodynamic as change of convection, wind, and temperature factor. As a master student at the River and Watershed Engineering Laboratory at Hokkaido University, and while also obtaining certification as a certificated weather forecaster and disaster prevention expert in Japan. Later in my career, I served as a JICA, Japan International Cooperation Agency's expert volunteer in Ecuador, where I supported tsunami evacuation planning and hazard mapping with local municipalities. After returning to Japan, I continued my research at the same laboratory, and here I have been engaged in projects that aim to apply scientific results to social issues in disaster prevention and mitigation, particularly in relation to heavy rainfall and flooding. And these experiences have given me a valuable insight into how disaster risk reduction must consider not only scientific knowledge, but also social background and hidden needs at the local scale. It's my background.
Thank you, all of you, for sharing a bit more about your background. So, what I want to do now is ask a bit about the research you actually presented. So, you've all kind of given a background who you are and how you've got, how you got to it. In about, say, 3 minutes each, can you talk a bit more about your actual research that you presented last year in Colombia?
Well, as I mentioned in my introductions, it's basically the research I presented is my previous research endeavors, which actually focusing on the preparing one part of managing strategies against volcanic disaster in Japan, as it's stated, it's predicted that within 20-25 years from now, that Japan will have another big eruptions from Sakurajima volcano, which could imitate the severity of the last big eruption Japan ever have in 20th century, which is in 1914s. Looking towards this probability, I presented the research that investigate all the possibility scenarios of volcanic eruptions, with particular focus on the volcanic ash disasters. That I analyze the return period of the volcanic eruption based on the data that we have from all the monitoring data that has been collected from several decades, and from that interpolated into some eruption scenarios. From those eruption scenarios, we made some volcanic ash transport and dispersions simulations, then analyze on all those scenarios how big the devastations and the damage that this eruption will give in Japan. Looking toward the results of this is basically, if we know several degrees of destructions, then that the government or authorities can be recommended to have dynamic plannings against this, to lessen the risk, to lessen the damage. So when the eruption happens, the loss can be minimized or even zeroed, which is one of the purpose of the Kagoshima cities as residing cities close to this volcano. So it's basically, this is the research that I've been presented on IDRiM and got the awards in the oral presentations.
And to give you a little bit of background about what I presented last year, my study area was in India, the city of Kolkata, where in the eastern part of the city, we had a lot of wetlands. We call them the East Kolkata wetlands. And wetlands, as you know, they are quite valuable as ecological resources. They not only filter wastewater, but they provide a lot of ecosystem services to any city that they serve. And they provide a lot of, they act as a habitat for a lot of flora and fauna, and they are very rich in biodiversity. So lately, in the past few decades, the city of Kolkata has witnessed urban sprawl, urban growth. So it has expanded in almost all directions, and specifically the eastern part, because it was greener, it was empty. And the East Kolkata wetlands is recognized as a Ramsar Convention site, where they identify wetlands all over the world which are protected and provide valuable ecological services. But however, there was a lot of encroachment in the past, specifically 2 or 3 decades, where a lot of gray surfaces, impermeable surfaces built up, encroached the green areas, the wetland areas. It impacted the water bodies. And because of this encroachment and impervious surface growth, there was this resultant problem of urban flooding. And earlier, these areas were floodplains, they were saucer-shaped, they were low in elevation. So it's quite natural for water to get logged there, for floods to occur there. And this paved surfaces, these concretized surfaces, aggravated this problem further. So because of the built-up, and since now we have people living in there, there is vulnerability, there is exposed assets because of these disasters. So now there is the problem. So we cannot undo the process of urbanization or urban expansion. But we now need to focus on probable solutions so that we can reduce the impact of these urban floods, and we can provide a better resilient infrastructure so that in long term, these problems can be mitigated to some extent. So I proposed nature-based solutions and some specific area-specific interventions on the hotspots that I had identified through an assessment of risk through using special multi-criteria analysis. And I had suggested some nature-based solutions with the suggestions that I had taken from the different stakeholder groups available in the field, in the study area. And that was my second award-winning presentation last year.
Okay, so let me share my talk about the last year's presentations about how we can rethink disaster recovery by applying the logic of care to what I call in disaster phase or in between disaster phase, the period between frequent overlapping events. So my reflections on coming from fieldwork in Takeo City, Saga Prefecture in southern Japan, was why focus on this inter-disaster phase. So because disasters don't arrive once and leave. They recur, sometimes in quick succession, and vulnerabilities compound, especially amid depopulation and shrinking resources in Japan. In such context, we're always recovering from past disaster X while preparing for future disasters such as Y and Z and etc. So past loses shape today's choices, and future threats already influence our actions and attentions. So this arises two hard questions. So first is where and how do we live and when disaster keep returning? And second, does telling people to coexisting with nature slide into regime of extreme self-responsibility, implicitly normalizing continuing lives in high-risk areas. So this choice and especially difficult for vulnerable populations and area, and yet the way individual decisions and fit into collective recovery are still not explored. So here I found inspiration outside conventional disaster studies in Dutch medical anthropologist Annemarie Moll's the code, the logic of care. The Moll contrasts logic of care, which places responsibility on one-off decision and their consequences, with the logic of care, in which is iterative, adaptive, and collaborative. So care emerges from ongoing adjustment among people, tools, and institutions, aiming for better enough lives rather than the single decision choice. So in Tokyo City, where I feel doing the field work, aging population and declining social systems, whilst floods recur along the Lukaku River. After severe floods in 2019 and 2021, a private volunteer hub called Omoyai emerged with the citizens. After severe, then Omoyai supported residents not only in cleanup but in the long recovery, matching needs, sharing information, and bridging gap among local government, professional agencies, NGOs, and neighborhoods. So in moments when formal designations under the disaster relief law left some communities outside of full coverage, Omoya used some such as crowdfunding for delivered to direct aid and exposing systemic inconsistencies while sustaining everyday life and recovery. So through this most lens or the logic of care, so effective recovery is not a matter of individual responsibility alone. It is also practice distributed across families, volunteer groups, governments, technologies, housing, and ecosystems, and so on. So build back better or caring about us requires open spaces for deliberation and joint actions, blurring rigid public-private boundaries. So and then local knowledge can travel upwards and shape policies. So that's my talks.
Yeah, in my research, I focus on bridging the gap between scientific research and local government practice. And we collaborate some municipalities and residents as a district group in Hokkaido Tokachi area. And as background, in Japan, a technical study committee has quantitatively assessed the regional impact of climate change on rainfall under SSP 1 to 2.8 climate scenario shown in 6 IPCC's report, which correspond to approximately 2 degrees global temperature rise since the Industrial Revolution. The national average change ratio of precipitation for 12 hours or longer duration with an annual exceeding probability of 1 by 100 is projected to be approximately 1.1 to 1.15 times the current climate. Like that, but the basic act on disaster management mandate preventive measures to avert or mitigate disaster, including the development of disaster management organization, training and education, facility improvement, and measures to prevent vulnerable population, which the act emphasize training and organized development, reflecting the significant role of municipal government in non-structural disaster measures. There remain no well-established methodology for municipal level flood response exercise, and particularly those that systematically incorporate the impact of climate change. However, generally in municipality in Japan, the emergency training is conducted simulating with only post-disaster information, like hazard mapping. And with the information, it is difficult to experience decision-making for emergency training in the post-disaster phases. So we have developed emergency training method using disaster scenarios based on climate projections from the perspective of climate adaptation. By applying climate dataset and flood simulation, we help municipalities and strengthen decision-making during disaster, such as establishing disaster response headquarters, coordinating shelters, and issuing evacuation information. It is the one part of my presentation at the 2024 IDRiM conference. In addition, I also conduct research on evaluating change in the probability distribution of river water level rise under climate change. Through collaboration with the local stakeholder, we found that this kind of pre-disaster risk information is important because it could help them better understanding evacuation lead time and measures and developing effective strategies. It comprehends hazard mapping like after disaster occur.
Thank you for sharing all your research. So one last question I want to talk about in terms of research before we move on to, other issues and other areas we can explore is very much about how has your research evolved. So speaking today, we're now 12.5 months on from Columbia last year, which means that the likelihood his research has changed within the last 12 months. So how has your research evolved since that presentation? And also, are you still doing the same research? Because I know of at least one of you is definitely doing something very different.
Yeah, since it's part of my PhD, it's basically the way it evolves now, it's been integrated with the new research centers that Kagoshima City has been built on 2024. So it's basically it's integrated to that, and then it will be used for the plannings and countermeasures strategies for the upcoming eruptions and volcanic disaster in Kagoshima. In related to that, as I mentioned earlier, so basically now I'm expanding to look at how the impact can evolve to all the societal consequences. As I mentioned in the previous, my endeavors is focusing on only one single hazards, and then how these many primary impacts affect different parts of life. Now, how many parts of life actually affected altogether, given any hazards that come. So it's in the way I expanding, although it's in the very different fields, but still try to find the connections that will enrich the research I've done before. So yeah, I mean, like now I'm doing very different, and like now I'm focusing on not in the natural hazards, but in preparing for war. But in a way, it's still how to actually evaluate the consequences that overlap each others and find solutions from it.
And in my case, I am still working on the same research, but yes, of course, it has evolved a lot. The last time I presented in the IDRiM YSS presentation, it was my master's thesis. And as you know, it takes we don't get a lot of time or resources to work on that research in the master's level because I had only 6 months to start and conclude and write my thesis. But now I will be carrying forward the research in my PhD, in my doctoral studies that I will be beginning in November this year. And as a part of that, I will be also including urban heat islands. Earlier, it was just urban floods. And I will also look into the different nuances of the impact that these natural hazards have in the lives of people in terms of daily livelihood, in terms of mobility, but also the geomorphological impacts, the hydrological impacts that these disasters have on the landscape itself, and how to cope with it from a geomorphological perspective, from a societal perspective, and also what can be the solutions, because that has always been my aim. So I will be changing the methodology of studying the research a bit, not a bit, but it will be a complete change in the methodological framework, because I will go more in depth in detail, and I will do multi-temporal transect analysis over the evaluation of the landscape, not only the landscape, but also the changing hazard patterns that we have these days. Like the tropical cyclones in countries like ours, I can compare it with Indonesia, with Japan, also India. We are all tropical countries. So the nature of disasters in these countries is also changing significantly because of climate change, global warming. Earlier, 10 years back, when I was going to school, I was a child, these tropical cyclones or the amount of precipitation that we had was not this intense or not this frequent that we have these days. Like currently, we are having tropical cyclones almost every year in India, in different coasts, in the eastern coast as well as the western coast. So studying the nature of these disasters itself, understanding the nuances and its impact on the people is my aim for the next stage of my study. So yeah, carrying it forward.
Okay, so for me, I have been and also now also working, fortunate to work with both researcher and collaborator with local communities and institutions about the compounding disaster or cascading disasters, and also inter-disaster or in between disaster phase. And now I'm a postdoctoral and also a young career researcher in Japan, and I have worked with municipal government, NGOs, and volunteer groups, which has and also individuals, which has given me opportunity to connect some knowledge or anthropological way with the policy and practice. And at the same time, my career has been shaped with international collaborations, especially with colleagues in Sri Lanka, and have some dialogues about how the flood disaster or landslide disaster happen and how they survive after the disasters, and how do we compare with the Japan case and compare and analyzing that. So these work ongoing work is very helpful for me, and then taught me how important it is to listen carefully, work across disciplines and other collaboration or some sectors, and create spaces where different kind of knowledge can meet. It's very important for me from last presentation, also from now. Yes, that's for my talk. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I have explained one current research before. However, I show some others. We are now expanding the method of the evacuation training to include collaboration between municipalities and residents by simulating the same potential disaster scenarios together for the clear conversation and communication between the government and residents, while how to increase the motivation, not only evacuation, but also caution before decision making for evacuation. And on the other hand, now we are conducting the how to say, evaluate the condition of the evacuation shelter in the winter condition in Hokkaido. In the Hokkaido, in Tokachi area, in the winter, the temperature decreases till 15 grad, minus 15 grad Celsius, so that the measures for the against climate is very important. Now we are managing not only the flooding, but also the total scale risk management in the local scale. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing how your research has evolved from last year. So I want to move on to the second point that we were wanting to explore, and this is very much about career experience so far. So we all, in research, we all have different experiences, different setbacks and different challenges. And one of the things that IDRiM has become increasingly aware of is that young researchers face unique and different challenges. And so the last few years, we've increasingly moved towards a split of in-person online to help those who face financial barriers or other reasons why they can't travel to the conference. This year, IDRiM is now putting on pre-conference workshops to look at different elements of challenges that researchers may be facing, whether it being publishing, or whether it's trying to find funding, or any other type of challenges. So what I wanted to find out from because we're all I'm a little bit out of the early career researcher bracket now, but we're all kind of early career researchers still. What are some of the biggest challenges you've actually faced so far in your career, and how have you been able to overcome them?
Well, the biggest challenge, I have several challenges, but let me put it into two. The first one is, of course, I'm moving towards from a field that very different from what I studied before, as my background is in informatics and computer science, which is hardcore, looking over the computer software and all those things. And I even work before continuing to postgraduate. I even work in the software companies, and which is like then move toward to research. That what it was necessity for me to have interdisciplinary knowledge, as I was exploring the disaster and the volcanic eruptions. The biggest challenge for me to actually to keep up with those knowledge that I need to learn from the scratch again about economics, about the volcanology, about the meteorology, which is I don't have any background on that since I'm focusing myself on informatics. Throughout the career and from master, PhD, and then even now that I starting something new, the challenge to actually absorbs the knowledge from many other fields, it's like sometimes frustrating because like you need to progressing faster, but since like you're exploring something new, you need to take it slowly, so it's become the knowledge become yours in order to progress your research. If it's a lot of patience and hard works to absorb that knowledge that sometimes for us the current researchers perhaps doesn't have. And if in time that we as master student, doctoral students needs have some deadlines that we need to achieve, and that absorbing those all many knowledge sometimes like in a way it's like very tiring and exhausting for us. The second challenge, of course, what I felt was progressing my career as a career researchers. Like after master, what's next? And after PhD, what's next? And looking jobs after PhD, it's not easy. Actually, you're exploring to many grants proposal, many postdoc opportunity, and I'm in some sense I was lucky here that after PhD, then I got offered as a program specific researchers in the same labs, and then when I applied here in Sweden, it's also progressing smoothly. But I know some of my friends or some of my colleagues that it's very difficult for them to get the next career progressions shortly after they finish the postgraduate. So for me, and basically as a career researcher, those two that's most challenging that I experienced in my research journey so far.
I also fully agree with what Haris said so far. Like there are personal as well as professional barriers sometimes. While progressing, when there is a change in the disciplines that you study, like coming from a background in geography to degree of planning, it was not a very smooth transition, but again, you have to imbibe a lot of new skills to upgrade your skill set. And also at a personal level, when I was working on my research, there were several limitations. First of all, the study area that I had chosen is having a very data scarce environment. Data was not available very easily. Also, the stakeholder network that I have built, which is now an asset for me when I will continue with the research in future during my doctoral research. But initially, building that network of stakeholders was quite a bit of a challenge, because getting appointments of the administrative authorities, getting appointments from people at a higher bureaucratic level was quite a bit of a challenge, and it was time consuming as well. And I had strict deadlines to meet, as Haris also mentioned, that we have strict deadlines about we had our midterm assessment, we had our thesis proposal defense, and of course the final defense, which is a span of roughly 6 months, where you also have to go through a lot of extra other coursework and also focus on your thesis simultaneously. So time management is something, data collection is something very time taking and challenging, but yes, if the time management is done efficiently and everything is done smoothly. Even I remember when I was in the field work, because my research consisted of human participants, because I was collecting data from human beings. I was doing surveys, I was doing focus group discussions and interviews. So it contained a lot of data which was restricted, and I had to abide by the GDPR compliances which are there. So getting the ethics approval also took some time, because I had to apply for an ethics approval in my university. And considering all those things, it went well, and it reached a very timely and fruitful conclusion. So I'm glad about that. But also another experience during my fieldwork, there was a political disturbance in my study area, because of which I could not access a few areas in my study area to gather data. Also data related to land use ownership was not available. Otherwise, I would have further fine-tuned my nature-based solutions, which I was suggesting. So, of course, focusing a bit deeper always helps, but we also need to hold our horses, like being too overambitious within this limited period of time also does not help. So this was my personal reflection during my research.
Yeah, it's great talks, and then it's also I'm agreeing, but slightly different because my career has been shaped first individual research project, because in traditionally way the anthropological fieldwork has conducted in individual, but also gradually I move more collaborative or comparative work across the countries. And in Japan, I have worked closely work with the local governments and other groups to study how communities and respond to recurring floods and earthquakes, such as Noto region or Kyushu regions. At the same time, in Sri Lanka, I have collaborated with the colleagues at the Department of the Geography and the university, and to examine the entanglement of the gem industry and flood risk in my field site in Sri Lanka. So this project has shown me the value of the international cooperation and also the comparisons, while the social, political, and ecological context differ greatly, and both places reveal how disasters are deeply woven into everyday life and local communities and economies. And working across these sites has helped me understand disaster risk management or reductions, not only as a technical challenge, but also as a matter of culture, history, and livelihood. So through these experiences, I have learned that building knowledge and also that translating some knowledge is very important, and it's not a solitary activity, but also working tandem. So it depends on long-term partnership, respect for local perspectives, and creating opportunities for dialogues between disciplines and across the national borders. So these comparative and collaborative research continues to guide my careers and motivations to connect anthropological insight and translating the knowledge or some perspectives with broader discussion in disaster risk reduction or some studies.
Thank you, Tsuchida-san. I think my challenge was a little bit similar. As I explained, my first career background was in meteorology, which was more like science-oriented engineering. Based on that knowledge, I tried to engage in discussion with local government and residents. However, I gradually realized that I couldn't fully respond to many of their concerns and questions. That was a major challenge for me. So instead of sticking only to an engineering approach, I made an effort to talk with local people and gain trust to understand their framework and background. and to review a broader range of research paper and academic discussion. Participating in the IDRiM conference was also one of these important experience for me. Now my challenge is how to connect methodological and hydrological research with community-based studies, and how to follow both stream research while building a logical framework within myself. I see this as one of my ongoing tasks for the future.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, your experiences. I'll quickly go through, my own. And Harris, I think you've probably heard a lot of these already. For me, the three main challenges. One is transitional. So like many of you, I also transitioned. So my background is actually physical geography. So as a kid, I always wanted to be a meteorologist. I found out that actually you could link that with social. So I started to move over to social sciences and climate change and the psychology bits of it. So I enjoyed that. But that meant a whole new skills. So I went into a PhD, literally going from a very physical straight into a very social. Financial, I think that we can all agree that financial is a big challenge. For me, with my PhD, was set up as I did not get a wage. I had to work to get money. So I was doing full-time research and teaching some weeks, 16 hours. So it's a bit of a that was a bit of a juggle, which also meant that I had to be very choosy on what I spent conference wise where I traveled. And then finally also loneliness. So I find that it depends on how your institution is based. So a PhD is obviously lonely inherently because it's your own individual topic. But my institution at the time at Northumbria, even though we're quite renowned for disasters, at the time I was the only person who was doing a PhD in disasters at the institution. So my office, which had about 8 of us in it, were all physical geographers, literally studying soil sediments to reconstruction of climate, which is, when you're looking at psychology of climate, is a completely different topic. So it's one of the reasons why increasingly when I've taken over, YSS back in 2022 from Mineta Sensei, and have been working very hard with, other committees to make sure that we have more of a community, built into this, because and I do the same in the UK as well, where we have our own organized alliance where we bring the young researchers together, and it's a lot of that is what I've been based upon, what I've experienced over the years. So reflecting upon, your now last year and you came in the top 3 in the award. What did the getting the award mean to you, both personally but also professionally?
Well, this is the most difficult questions because I didn't expect to be awarded at all. So it's basically personally, of course, it's being a joy, and I actually have I think most of us that going to PhD Pritam, perhaps it's a one message for you that it will be very lonely. So embrace it. But again, if you got this kind of awards or any competitions or any grants and you got it, it's like sometimes provide the relief of this, that your hard works pays off, that your research basically appreciated with other people. That means that it give me particularly self-satisfactions, that all the works that I have done is that it's listened by the people, and people understand that this is important works in my life. Professionally, perhaps it also helps me to find job here that looks that okay, you actually perform well in your research, and it's acknowledged. Where many people in conference, going to the conference, of course you will have in some sense many conflictings and ideas with people, perhaps that you found someone doing the similar work with you with better results, or someone criticizing your works that it's not important enough. But as I mentioned, having this awards, it means your works are acknowledged and appreciated, and that it's approved when you put in your CVs perhaps and your applications, that okay, you perform well in the research environments, and then it's adding up on your performance that will be looked by the recruiters, perhaps. And in short, it helps me to land this job in Sweden.
Indeed, Harris, I couldn't agree more. And you also covered a lot of things that I was about to say. But yeah, I fully agree with you. You, of course, motivated me too before I start this journey, because the job which I am doing right now, I had put in my CV that I had won this award from the IDRiM conference last year. And it really helped me to land up in this job that I am. My research was recognized at an international platform. It helped. And also for my PhD, the funding that I have received has this award has also played a significant role in achieving that funding from the government. And moreover, at a personal level, of course, we are researchers and we are definitely passionate about research. That's what brings us here. That's why we have ended up being a researcher. And so far, it has been quite amazing. And whenever I present my research in any platform, even after the IDRiM conference last year, I was in Barcelona in a disaster risk reduction academy, where I presented a poster about my research. All of us, I would relate to all of you. All of you are from meteorology and other like these fields. And whenever you are surrounded by people who are coming from maybe mathematics or natural sciences, maybe physics, chemistry, biology, you would notice a difference between you and the others present around you, because people tend to come to you more and interact with you more because people are able to relate your research with their lives. Somebody in front of whom I'm presenting about floods must have seen a flood in his or her lifetime and must have been a victim of some natural disaster. And the moment you are talking to that person, the person is able to connect with you. The person is able to resonate with his or her experiences and is more keen to listen to what you have worked on to mitigate those problems. So I am very proud that I'm a geographer, because not every discipline can relate so much directly with the human lives. Of course, other disciplines, irrespective of their complicated theories, they still have an impact on people's lives. But whenever you are, even if you are traveling somewhere, the moment people hear that you're a geographer, people are keen to talk to you, to know more about your subject or your research. So that makes me very happy that I'm able to connect directly with the society, not only like as a researcher restricting myself, but also meaningfully conveying the outcomes of my research to the society. So that's what makes me happy at the end of the day.
That's great. So in my personal reflections, within this young scientist sessions, our in IDRiM 2024 was a very encouraging moment for me. So it gave me some confidence, more confidence to continue my interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary work, and also connected me to some network, not only the scientific, but also like a more practical network of young researchers or practitioners around the world, and who are working on disaster risk reductions or management from these different angles or some perspectives. And with yeah, and I felt that this award was not just recognition of my own work, but also the committees and collaborators who supported my research, and also to have some continuing my research topics with some research fund. So in this case, so it was very truly a shared achievement for me, and also going to moving forward, I will try to continue this work and research, and also collaboration with other researchers and some nations. Yeah, that's my reflections.
Yeah, I agree fully with Tsuchida-san. Yeah, I also got confidence with my research. And also, it was my first time presentation in Spanish. Yeah, I worked in Ecuador so that I speak in Spanish. However, in the conference, it was first time, so that it was a great experience. And I was surprised, and my hand was shaking when I received the award. Truly honored to receive the Younger Scientist Award, and I greatly value the encouragement from the committee. And having receiving last year's award, I'm grateful to have been given support to attend this year's IDRiM conference to Greece. And as a result of presentation in the conference, I also had the opportunity to be invited as a lecturer at the Regional Disaster Risk Management Conference in CESAL Department in Colombia. This experience allowed me to share my work internationally and to discuss with practitioners working in different social and institutional contexts. It was a great experience. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing all your experiences from after winning this award. Now we are very tight with time, and I have one last question, which is very pertinent to this year's conference. So, in 20 seconds, any tips for our researchers who will be presenting from tomorrow over the next 2 weeks?
Tips is very simple. Always thinking that what is important, that communicate, that always thinking that, okay, I found this research, I found the results from the research I've done, and so what? Finding the answer of this so what is important, that makes you connect with your audience. That's important in the presentations. Try to connect with your audience, but finding the answer of so what of this the results that you found. That's it.
Yeah, I would like to say that the platform that you are getting, it's a very valuable platform, and don't be afraid. You can, whether you win the award or not, ultimately, as a scientist, our main aim is to contribute meaningfully to the society. So go ahead with it. And I wish this year's participants all the best, and looking forward to attend the session online and listen to all the presentations.
So my quick tips for that for future OEDs would be embrace both challenges and uncertainties of research and some presentations. So disasters are complex phenomena, and sometimes also data and framework or some experimentations are it's very difficult, or some feel uncertain. But these moments are also opportunity to learn and some find new perspectives. So to do it better. Yeah.
In a few words, for future young scientists, my advice would be to pass both experiences and perspectives, build some strong collaboration with local community, and maintain a scientific perspective on emerging needs. And I believe that disaster risk reduction requires all of these elements working together: scientific knowledge, local context, and diverse experience.
Right. Aris, Pritam, Ria, Akihiro, thank you. So for those who are listening to the podcast on the day of the release, just a reminder that the conference starts tomorrow, Tuesday, the 23rd of September. And we hope to see you either online or in person in Samos over the next 2 weeks. And we hope everyone has a good conference.